ladies and gentlemen, the feds and the Las Vegas prosecutors in the Tupac murder case are coordinating, not allegedly, are coordinating involving the Tupac murder case. What this means for all allegations that have been asserted on both sides, including the $1 million hit, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time on this Sunday evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I got a tad bit of breaking news, if you will. It has been confirmed that the feds and the Las Vegas District Attorney's Office have been basically coordinating involving the Tupac Shakur murder case, while motions are flying back and forth in the courtroom, or should I say in the case, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, bringing you nothing but straight game. Like I said, I like to say what's up to everybody this evening that comes in and chooses to join the chat. Very much appreciated, right? But tonight we're going to talk about and breaking down in a shocking twist in the Tupac Shakur murder case that a lot of people are misunderstanding on purpose, right? And some by accident. Like I said, some people are misunderstanding on purpose to create their own narrative, and some people are misunderstanding by accident, right? The reports basically are federal agents basically are quietly coordinating with the Las Vegas prosecutors in the Tupac Shakur murder case, while Duane Keefe D Davis remains in prison and is the only person charged, right? Like I said, what we're going to talk about is what's reported, right? What's actually on the record, and what it does and does not mean. Like I said, because over here, like I said on Straight Game, man, we're going to do the facts over the fantasy. You know what I mean? Like I said, I want to bring you this. But it is a fact that the feds and the Las Vegas prosecutors have been basically going back and forth over various information. And we're going to talk about what this means actually for the $1 million hit allegations. Once again, a lot of things can be sometimes undone or unsaid, if you will, but some things actually can't be, and that's why this is so serious, right? So basically what's being reported, like I said, according to the reporting, federal investigators have been communicating with the Clark County District Attorney's Office as they prepare the case, right? As they prepare their case to try to win the case against Keefe D, right? The focus, per the sources, is on the historical gang activity, the long-standing criminal networks, and the individuals alleged to have wanted Tupac dead. And that would include, like I said, the individuals who allegedly that wanted to have Tupac dead, and that includes Sean P. Diddy Combs and the allegations. Like I said, once again, allegations, nothing has been proven as of yet, right? And what's important here is to add the clarity to it. Like I said, once again, there's no public federal murder charges as of yet. There is no public indictment naming anyone else. The case in court still centered solely on Keefe D. And so what they possibly could be discussing, other than what I just said, like I said, the historical gang activity, the long-standing criminal networks, and the individuals alleged to have wanted Tupac dead. as we've seen in the Diddy documentary, ladies and gentlemen, and this is why I think that this is kind of moving forward and gotten a little bit stronger, is the allegations by Kirk Burroughs. A lot of people thought that he had a lot of credibility. I don't know if somehow, some way they might be trying to connect what Keefe D has said in the past in regards to, Diddy and the alleged $1 million hit, and what Kirk Burroughs has alleged on the Sean P. Diddy Combs Diddy Reckoning documentary. But what I do know is factually, like I said, this is according to reports. Federal investigators have been communicating with the Clark County District Attorney's Office, right, as they prepare the case against Keefe D. And so let's go into why this is not really unusual a lot of times, right? Why the federal and state coordination isn't unusual. When you hear the feds are involved, people jump straight to a conspiracy because, the feds usually, their high conviction rate involving a lot of drug conspiracies and things like that of the past kingpin charges and things like that. People jump to conspiracy, right? But in reality, coordination happens when, like I say, when crimes span decades. You know what I mean? We know that this Tupac situation is like over almost 3 decades old, if you will, right? Also, when witnesses cross state lines, right? So, like I said, you got a lot of witnesses that cross state lines. The situation happened in Vegas. A lot of the people that were alleged to be involved lived in California and various other places, right? Also, the gang activity overlaps jurisdictions. You see them, and remember they charged Keefe D with murder with the gang enhancement attachment to it, right? And so that's probably one of the other reasons, or federal records exist that the states don't have. Now, this goes into, and I say once again, federal records exist that the states don't have. Now, once again, when you talk about the federal records, remember, Death Row was being investigated for drug activity by the ATF. It was believed or confirmed that Kevin Hackey was an undercover operative working in conjunction with the ATF or the federal government at the time of Tupac shooting, right? And so whatever information and things that they may have gathered, it might be going over things like that. Various other things, like I said, you have the situation in New York, the Quad studio shooting, and all of the other various things that they possibly can, be going over. But more importantly, it is a fact that they are coordinating, like I said, once again. So, and that doesn't mean new defendants, if you will. That it doesn't mean that there's going to be new defendants. It means information sharing and not secret indictments. So like I said, doesn't say that Diddy's going to be indicted, doesn't say, that they got some other, cooperating witnesses or anything other than that. Like I said, but it's if you're Sean P. Diddy Combs right now, I wouldn't say, Keefe D, because Keefe D's already been charged. You know what I mean? It's moment for pause if you're thinking about it, because right now Sean P. Diddy Combs is in federal prison. So the feds basically coordinating with the state. Kirk Burroughs, the documentary coming out, the new fresh, statements by Keefe D in regards to the alleged $1 million hit. I could see why this has kind of, risen back up to the top again. And that's what I said. I was like, oh, wow. They really putting this in the forefront. See, because when Murder Rap came out, what was that, May of 2006? No, I think it was February of 2016, if you will, right? So, that's a lot of years that had passed. And, for people who weren't, old enough to really understand what was going on involving the Tupac case, with this Diddy documentary, The Reckoning, coming out, people really got a chance to hear what Keefe D had to say and the implication of himself, the implication of his nephew, all of the other things that he had talked about, who was in the car, the names, various activities that happened after the shooting, the fact that, when they were riding up, what was it, Koval, and Tupac was allegedly hanging out the window, screaming whatever, and the girls were talking, Tupac, too. All of those things the world got to hear, right? And so now, and also, like I say, the allegation about, the meeting with Sean P. Diddy Combs at Greenblatt's in L.A., talking about wanting to have something done to Suge and Tupac, right? Like I said, people were going to believe what they're going to believe, but when somebody implicates themselves in a high-profile murder, people are usually all ears. They're like, hold on, is he just said that he was involved? What's this? And we're talking about not people who have been following the situation. We're talking about people who don't actually know nothing about it. If you just watch the Diddy documentary based on the fact that you're watching to hear what they had the new footage and all of those. If you just watching and you're a layperson, you really don't know anything about the Tupac situation and, how they are intertwined that Tupac situation in the documentary, talking about the Cassie situation and all of the other things. What I think was also important about that is when Cassie had mentioned the situation involving Jerry's Deli over in West Hollywood when somebody spotted Suge Knight over there and they allegedly got in the trucks with the guns and so on and so forth, as alleged by Cassie, and went over there basically and was, planning on doing something or getting it over with or whatever, and they had some kind of altercation, right? All of those things. Because the Cassie, as we saw, the Cassie situation ultimately created the criminal indictment. And so with that being said, now, here you see the federal government now coordinating with the Las Vegas district attorney's office in regards to this murder trial and this murder case against Keefe D, right? Overall, like when we deal with the $1 million hit claim, what's fact and what's allegations? You know what I mean? And we got to separate the two. What is a fact and what is an allegation, right? Now let's address this, the most explosive part of the story, the $1 million hit claim, right? The $1 million hit claim. Now, we've heard Suge Knight talk about it. We've heard Suge Knight talk about what Keefe D told him about it. This is just recently on the Art of Dialogue, ladies and gentlemen. Suge Knight had never really spoke about the $1 million hit claim and what he believed. He never talked about that until he talked about it with the Art of Dialogue. If you have not heard that, you got to go and listen to what he told the Art of Dialogue. And like I said, it's been, a few minutes here. We really haven't heard from Suge Knight. I don't know why, but like I said, when he explained to the Art of Dialogue that Keefe D told him about why the situation went down with Tupac. Keefe D also basically corroborated not what was said, but corroborated the meeting with Vlad on Vlad TV. So once again, for the people who are kind of in the dark about this, it's out there. Like I said, other people have regular lives and things like this, but this is what we do, or this is what I do over here on Straight Game TV. And so when you understand that, recently when Suge coming out, Vlad's situation with Keefe D came out a while back, and then Suge from prison, doing a phone interview with the Art of Dialogue, basically corroborated what Keefe D had said about the meeting. But Suge elaborated a little bit more and basically said, hey, since people talking about it now, he felt like it was cool for him to really talk about it in detail, in which he did. And he talked about how, he's seen Keefe D, like I said, once again, at a Lakers and New Jersey Nets game, and they talked about it. Keefe D allegedly told him about the money, about the hit, about all of that, what would happen. Keefe D basically, he said, started off the conversation and denying anything having to do with the killing of Tupac, Suge's homeboy, basically was Mob James' brother. Keefe D denied having anything to do with that. Buntry, may he rest in peace, had denied anything having to do with that. But he also implicated Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., saying that security was involved occult conspirators involved in the situation. Now, this is what Suge Knight is telling, saying that Keefe D is telling him at this game as they have a conversation. Then Suge Knight said he got to go to the bathroom, told Keefe D, come on, walk in the bathroom with me. And Suge said that Keefe D allegedly said, nah, man, I ain't going to no bathroom with you, right? So now, when we talking about the $1 million hit, this is what Suge saying that Keefe D told him firsthand. Both of them were allegedly, according to Suge, just getting out of prison at that particular time, right? So now, let's address the most explosive part of the story and the $1 million hit. For the people that don't really understand how things went down back then and wasn't around, when Tupac Drop hit him up, just for a little bit of context, when Tupac Drop hit him up, ladies and gentlemen, it was an earthquake. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. Because the fact of the matter, Tupac had the whole lane. I tried to tell people, Tupac had the whole lane. The lane was his. Coming out of jail, dropping All Eyes on Me, selling as many records as he was selling. The only person that was kind of doing those numbers at that time with Tupac was Alanis Morissette, right? And with her Jagged Little Pill album, right? But at that particular time. So now, but you got to understand, Hit 'Em Up wasn't on All Eyes on Me. It was like a B-side single. But when it came out, it was like, what? You know what I mean? The allegations, the things that he was saying, how Tupac felt, the end of the record and all of the things that he was saying, it would cause one to pause to understand what had happened. Tupac being shot at Quad. Tupac, Suge losing his homeboy, in Atlanta. And all of the background things that most people didn't really know that were attached to the situation, right? Okay, you have that. So now, you come in and around June 1996, Tupac Drop Hit 'Em Up. It was an earthquake. Nobody expected it. You know what I mean? You hear the album. If you bought the album, you basically anticipate what you hear on the album. That's gonna be that until the next album. Nah. Hit 'Em Up was a whole new dose breed of what it was, and it kind of reminded me, to be perfectly honest, of No Vaseline from Ice Cube. You know what I mean? If you listen to how Tupac did Hit 'Em Up, and then you go listen to No Vaseline, and you hear that, that old record sample to make it familiar, then then write, God damn, I'm gonna set it off. You know what I mean? First off, up, you know what I mean? And you hear that similarity there, right? But it was a whole new breed. Tupac fresh out of jail, and just it was something else. So now, flip to the Bad Boy side of things. They having a little bit of success, while Tupac locked up. When Tupac come home, everything put on hold. Bad Boy basically kind of ceased. I wouldn't say ceased to exist, but as far as moving records, everything was on hold. Tupac album was number one. And it was, like I said, Snoop had did what he did, the Dog Pound, Here Come Tupac, and it was like, the Murder Was Case soundtrack, all of that, the way that Death Row was moving records was unheard of at that time, right? So now, you go to what we didn't know at the time, right? The feelings, emotions, and all of the things that came after that. If you saw the Tupac interview where he was talking to the young lady inside of his condo for the Vibe magazine interview, he was like, yeah, when I came out of jail, when I was in jail, they was talking this, I got raped, I got whoop-de-whoop, this happened, that happened. Now that I'm out, everybody be like, hey, man, won't you chill? You killing the game. He was like, no. He was like, well, what happened to, the decency that he expected? They didn't give him none. So Tupac was basically on the warpath. You know what I mean? And not on the warpath as trying to hurt somebody, but just the music, how relentless he was, and his approach to doing what he did. Right. So now, we come to hear about later on, after everything happens, about what Keefe D came out and said about this $1 million hit thing. Right? The allegations come solely from Keefe D. Right? his own recorded statements, including a 2008 LAPD interview later entered into evidence in this current murder trial, as well as the 2009 interview that he gave to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So you can see why the feds in the Las Vegas District Attorney Office could be talking or should I say could be talking, but are talking according to reports, right? In regards to that situation, right? And listen, in those recordings, Keefe D claims that Sean P. Diddy Combs offered money, right? The amount discussed was $1 million. The target was Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight, right? This is without any kind of speculation. Nobody's saying it. If you heard it, you heard it. If you watched the Diddy reckoning thing, you understand where I'm coming from, right? So, like I said, no exaggeration needed, no lies needed, no fantasy needed, right? Right? This is straight game reality, right? But here's the other side of that coin, right? There's no corroborating witnesses, right? No financial records, right? No charges tied to that claim in regards to Sean P. Diddy Combs. Now, there is one person, according to Keefe D, once again, Keefe D placed Corey Edwards at the scene of the meeting at Greenblatt's. Also, Corey Edwards was in Las Vegas on the night of the shooting by his own testimony in regards to a police interview that he did, right, with Greg Kading and them involving some other situation. And these are all records and facts that I looked up. And so with that being said, when you understand that, you understand, okay, in that situation when involving Corey Edwards, as far as as far as Greenblatt's was concerned, I never knew anything about that until I heard Keefe D say that, right? Keefe D said on the recording with Greg Kading and them, they asked him, well, who else was there? And he was like, me, Corey, and he said, everybody, his crew or whatever. Now, whoever that meant, I don't know the other people, but he did mention Corey by name. This is on the tape that he recorded, or should I say the confession that he recorded with Greg Kading. You see what I'm saying? And so when you think about that, you think about, okay, well, who else was there? They said, well, there's no corroborating witnesses. Well, once again, to corroborate that the meeting actually took place with Sean P. Diddy Combs at Greenblatt's, right? I don't know if Corey Edwards is a witness or whatever, and I don't know none of those things. I just know I saw the statement about Vegas, and I heard Keefe D mention his name in regards to the Greenblatt situation where the alleged hit was discussed. You get it? So now, once again, this is real factual information. So I can only imagine what the feds could be talking to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office about. And then I take you back to what? The Kurt Burrows, who was, like I said, once again, who was the co-owner of Bad Boy, talking about he rented cars, in Harlem for cars to go out to Vegas to the fight, on that fight weekend, if you will. Now, this is, once again, another connecting of the dots. So like I said, once again, so now listen, even prosecutors, right, acknowledge, right? These are facts. Even the prosecutors acknowledge that this is an allegation and it remains uncorroborated, if you will, right? And that's to Diddy's credit or discredit, however you want to see it, once again, but that's never stopped the government from filing charges, before. Like I said, even with the Cassie situation, whether they had a lot of evidence or whether you thought the evidence was strong or not, like I said, as the saying goes, they were indict a ham sandwich, if you will, and so like I said, listen, and why do the prosecution still care about the recordings, ladies and gentlemen? You know what I mean? Why do they still care about these recordings involving Keefe D? And you got to ask yourself a question. So why do the prosecutors keep referencing these recordings, right? Listen, because statements against interest, even disputed ones, what can they do? They can establish a motive. Once again, they care, and most people most people forget this. They look at what they want to look at. Like I said, some by on purpose, they overlook it, but then some people by mistake because they're getting bad information, right? You know what I'm saying? So you got to ask yourself, so why did the prosecution keep going back to the statements that Keefe D made in regards to this? Like I said, you got the 2008 interview and you got the 2009 interview. The 2008 interview with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the feds, and the 2009 interview with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, right? So you got to ask yourself, well, why do the prosecutors keep referencing these recordings, right? Because statements against interest, even disputed ones, can establish what? They establish motive. Why did it happen? Like, most people were saying, yeah, Pac was killed by Suge, in death row because Tupac was going to leave death row. Well, once we found out that Tupac wasn't really signed to death row, then that motive jumped out the window. Because there was no monetary gain for Suge Knight. Tupac was worth more, factually, if you understand how the music industry works. He was worth more for Suge Knight, especially if what most people were saying, or they was going to start Death Row East. He was worth more to Suge Knight alive than he was dead. I'm talking about facts. I'm not talking about what people thinking, like, when you talk about business. So if you're going to start Death Row East with Tupac, allegedly Eric B. and all of these other people, right? Then why would Suge want Tupac dead? He want him alive. You see what I'm saying? And so that wouldn't be something that would be a motive. But on the other hand, when they saying, okay, cool, they focusing on these statements, this $1 million hit, because it would establish a motive as to why things went down the way they did, among other things, like Keefe D was saying. Just like he said on ABC News, he was talking about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., being a part of the conspiracy, like he told Suge Knight at the basketball game. You see what I'm saying? It also shows alleged intent. It also explains relationships and people who had certain relationships. You listen to the Diddy documentary, you heard other people coming in saying who Diddy had a relationship with, his alleged relationship with certain gangs and things of that nature, right? But Diddy has always tried to deny that. But you have 1, 2, and 3, and 4 people from different neighborhoods in LA basically saying that, hey, you know what? We were friends. We were cool. You know what I mean? And I can understand, under the pressure or under scrutiny and questions from reporters or interviewers and all of those things, why Diddy would deny that. Okay, cool. That's for him to handle that under the circumstances, right? But it explains relationships and or contextualizes the crime environment, lets you know what the environment was back during that time. You see what I'm saying? And so that's the reason why I think that this is very important as to the feds now talking to the DA, the Las Vegas District Attorney's Office in regards to this high profile case, which is going to take place later this year. I'm not here to tell you what to think, how to think, who to believe in, and who you think guilty, innocent, who lied and who didn't tell the truth, and all of those things. That's not really up for me to decide. When they get into the courtroom, that's going to be decided by 12 people, right? If not a plea is taken or some kind of agreement is come to at that particular time, right? Right? And also understanding the context that I'm giving, the context is not a conviction. It's not a conviction. It's a real conversation, and the conversation that's always supposed to be had when you're talking about something like this. Not nobody trying to forecast as to who, what, when, and where, and how, and they weren't there. See, I wasn't there. I'm telling you all the facts about who was there, who placed who there, and why it is what's happening. Just like right now, right? In the Tupac case, the feds and the Vegas DAs are coordinating, right? I gave you what they're coordinating on, right? And why the DA keeps referencing the Keefe D $1 million allegation, right? Because that establishes partial motive. Because we seen what happened on the tape at the MGM Grand with the Orlando Anderson situation. We understand that could have been the motive. But once again, it also establishes the motive as to why it was done, what Keefe D said. what Keefe D told Suge, allegedly, right? You get it? And like I said, once again, you get into Keefe D's now his own defense and his position in the situation, right? Keefe D's legal team, now they arguing what? He lied for attention, right? He lied to sell his book, right? Oh, he lied to profit from documentaries. Okay. You know, and if that's true, that's a whole nother situation in where I get what people are saying publicly, but in the courtroom, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to, because now it's going to be about who do you believe? Who do you believe has credibility as far as, you know, do you believe, and they set the timeline like this. You know, Mr. Davis thought that he had immunity, you know, while he was out there saying all of these things. He wrote the book. He thought that he was protected under the United States by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he thought that he had immunity, not a simple proffer deal, right? And didn't understand the deal that he had. So now you got to understand why Mr. Davis is out here mentioning all of these things that he had told the feds and told Los Angeles Police Department as well as Vegas. He thought he had a deal. Okay, cool. It turned out to be something different, ladies and gentlemen. And that something different allowed the police then to charge the state police in Vegas to charge him with the murder of Tupac Shakur based on his own confessions. But now we know when we back it up, right? What Keefe D's legal team now argues is, yeah, you know, he was lying for attention. You know, he lied to sell his books. You know, he lied to profit from documentaries and interviews with Art of Dialogue, Vlad, and whoever else would interview him in regards to him promoting his book, right? Okay, right. But listen, that defense matters because if the jury believes he lied, then they may question everything he said. And that might benefit Keefe D. You see what I'm saying? That's if they believe it, right? That goes in now to how well the prosecution can put on its case. If the prosecution can come in and put on its case, give him a timeline and say, but you know, he said this when he thought he had that. Then once he got caught, then he starts saying this. You know, he said this in his book, right? You get it? And so all of those things and the context of those things really, truly, honestly matters in this situation. But ladies and gentlemen, you know, make no mistake about it. When the feds and the state government start corroborating and congregating and conversating and coordinating and doing all the things that they do, you know, usually you got to watch out because you got state government and federal government that possibly can be conjuring up something. And like I said, you know, if Kirk Burrows out here saying what he's saying about the situation, you know, Keefe D said what he said, you know, Suge said what he said, not that he might testify anything like that, but when you take in totality to all of these people that were there, that had a front row seat, you understand what I'm saying? Kirk Burrows had a front row seat. He was the co-owner of Bad Boy. Suge Knight had a front row seat. He was the driver of the black BMW, as well as, you know, entrenched in the gang life, in the street life, as well as the CEO of Death Row Records, right? Right? Keefe D basically implanted himself in the front seat of the car, you know, saying that he handed the gun off to his nephew, all of those things. These are front seat players. That's why this is so important. This is not, you know, somebody, you know, saying something about what they believe and now they're alleging and why people say what they say and they recant what they say. You can't recant anything if you didn't see it and you weren't there for it. You know what I mean? You know, you have these internet people out here, YouTubers out here talking about, I take back what I said. You know, you can't take back what you said because what you said didn't mean anything because you weren't there. The only people that can try to take back what they said, like Keefe D saying, hey, you know what? I wasn't in Vegas. You know what I mean? I lied for attention. I lied to sell books. You know, I lied to profit from the documentaries and things like that and the interviews he was doing, right? He can say that, right? Because he's being charged with murder, with gang enhancement, right? Suge Knight can say what, you know, what he experienced because he was there. You know, according to him, he got shot in the head. According to Keefe D, Suge Knight got shot in the head because Keefe D said he what? He witnessed it. He said, I thought Suge was dead. I watched the bullet go in his head. He said, I thought he was dead. That's what he said on the Diddy thing, right? Via the Greg Kading interview, correct? So now, right, these are Kurt Burrows said what? I rented these cars. you know what I mean? And from Harlem, on that fight weekend, and blase, blah, right? And so that's going to be up to those individuals in the prosecution and the defense and how they play out and defend their client in regards to the situation, right? You got to understand. And then you ask yourself, well, why does Diddy name appear in the court filings, right? Right? Diddy's name reportedly appears over 77 times, ladies and gentlemen. 77 times, right? Diddy name appears in the court filings over 77 times, right? So now, not as a defendant though, not as a defendant, but as part of the background allegations raised by Keefe D himself. You see what I'm saying? Which is never helpful. It's never helpful from that perspective. If you've seen the Art of Dialogue video when Keefe D was like, brother love, come on, show a brother some love. You know what I mean? And like, financial help, you know what I mean? Because like I said at one time, they knew each other. You know what I mean? I guess Keefe D was probably going through some things, and this was prior to him being arrested. Keefe D was like, brother love, come on, I see you out there. Show a brother some love. You know what I mean? So from that perspective, but in the court filings, which really matters more than anything anybody else is saying, in the court filings, Diddy's name is mentioned over 77 times, right? Not as a defendant, but as part of the background allegations raised by Keefe D himself. Listen, prosecutors have not argued Diddy's involvement in open court. Let's be clear. The prosecution has not argued Diddy's involvement in open court. The DA has stated publicly their case is currently limited to Keefe D only. Let's be clear about that. But like I said, with them talking to the feds, you just never know. You know what I mean? You just never know, right? And so most people ask the question, well, what does this mean moving forward, right? And here's what actually matters. You know what I mean? In the next, coming months, if you will, right? Whether Keefe D's statements survive the evidentiary challenge, what they have up there right now, his lawyers just filed a suppression motion, if you will. Will it survive that? Like I said, once again, whether his credibility holds under cross-examination. That's whether Keefe D even takes the stand or chooses not to take the stand. But at this particular point, he's basically in a fight for his life. But that would be up to him and his lawyers on how they wish to proceed, whether Keefe D will get up on the stand and be like, hey, under the pressure of cross-examination, what is he going to say? You know what I mean? Well, you said this on this date, but then you changed your story. Could that be because, the deal was off? You said that Greg Kading told you blah, 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 right? You said this and you said that, and trying to peep out the inconsistencies in the story. And then you would have to see what Keefe D's response would be once again. And then you start to deal with the jurors looking up there and can he handle the pressure and stay poised under the pressure and not crack and get angry. And the jury starts to look at him like, yeah, this guy has a temper or whatever. They look at things like that. You know what I mean? They judge people like that. This is 12 people who may have heard of the case. Another thing I always like to say is, when the Diddy documentary came out, let's say in Las Vegas, some of those people watched the Diddy documentary. When they doing the jury, in the jury pool and they picking the jurors, some of them people watched the Diddy documentary. Are they tainted by that, right? Or not tainted by that, leaning towards Keefe D's side, who knows, right? But more leaning towards, oh, this guy said what? He said that they were walking on the street corner and watched the ambulance roll by, and he thought it was funny as shit. You see what I'm saying? So once again, and people can take one statement, which is sometimes unfair, one statement, and make that something that sticks in their head, and they'll judge you by that one statement. That's why this situation is so dangerous. We've seen it happen to people, you argue with somebody, they say one thing, well, you said this, and they just want to hop on that one thing you said because that benefits their side of the argument. So that's another thing, like I said, with this case, and that documentary just being shown not too long ago, also, once again, whether Keefe D's credibility holds in cross-examination if he takes the stand, and whether prosecutors can prove he was the shot caller, right? Now, that part right there, I don't think is really going to be hard. Keefe D did a lot of talking. Keefe D talked about how many kilos he was getting from the Colombians, you know, how he was, you know, fronting everybody work, how, you know, Diddy was, you know, they wasn't popping Cristal, they was drinking the cheap champagne when he got, you know what I mean? It's just so much, you know, excessive talking that really didn't need to take place, but it did for whatever reason. And so, like I said, the worst thing a person could ever do is be their own worst witness against themselves. Like I said, I always believe in keeping your mouth shut, especially if you're involved in illegal activity. You know what I mean? You know, because everything you say can and will be used against you literally in the court of law, point blank period, especially in a high profile murder case as such as this one right here, you know. And so, like I said, that's going to be, you know, what it is. Everything else, ladies and gentlemen, that you hear is noise, right? I'm going to say it again. Everything else you hear, listen, if it's not, whether Keefe D's statements survive evidentiary challenges, whether his credibility holds under cross-examination, or whether the prosecutors can prove he was the shot caller, right? These are some of the most poignant things that are going to need to take place at trial for them to achieve a conviction, right? Everything else that you're going to hear about this case is going to be noise, because that's what the hill that the prosecution has to climb, right? And that's the hill that Keefe D has to stand on, and stand on it firm in order not to be convicted in this situation. But we all know, and we've all heard the tapes, right? We've seen the interviews, right? So like I say, you know, the straight game takeaway is this: a federal coordination, ladies and gentlemen, right? Will it equal new charges? We don't know. You know what I mean? Allegations, you know, basically, no, they're not evidence. Statements, no, they're not convictions, right? Right? Until the filings change, the case remains Keefe D versus the state of Nevada, if you will, right? And I'm gonna keep you posted as to what it is. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the Vegas DA and the feds are coordinating. You know, like I said, what this ends up being, we're gonna have to wait and see. Like I said, I appreciate everybody in the chat. I appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming through. Yeah. See, when you say who's that said that? Jermaine, when you say that means you can think on the fly and still get it out, because it's not written down, Jermaine. You might want to learn that one day. You know, but like I said, for everybody in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Just wanted to bring you this to let you know, to keep you up to date. Like I say, this is your boy Delray, platinum artist, platinum songwriter. Ladies and gentlemen, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Your boy Delray. Jermaine, it's always Straight Game.
Blackjack. Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.